And on to the Ethiopian capital of Addis Ababa now, where foreign ministers from across Africa have gathered for the African Union's 46th ordinary session of the Executive Council. The ministers will discuss the continent's key priorities, and a new AU chairperson will also be elected. This year's theme is on justice and reparations for historical crimes committed against Africans. They are meeting ahead of the African Union Summit, bringing together heads of state and government. Ministers have been giving their keynote address at the opening ceremony for the Executive Council session. They highlighted pressing issues for the continent, as well as a shared vision for peace and prosperity. While as leaders converge for this year's African Union Summit, the continent stands at a crossroads, from Sudan and South Sudan to the Democratic Republic of Congo and the Sahel. Unresolved conflicts continue to tear communities apart. The question remains, with violence still reigning supreme, does the African Union need to change its strategy? Here is Ejitien's Anoxikolia with the story.
The M23 rebels' capture of extensive areas in the resource-rich eastern region of the Democratic Republic of Congo has renewed a humanitarian and diplomatic crisis, drawing in multiple neighboring nations. The DRC remains one of the most complex conflicts in Africa, with every effort to bring a lasting solution ending in sheer disappointment. The African Union's efforts here have focused on diplomatic engagements, giving its support to the Luanda process, which seeks dialogue between the DRC and neighboring Rwanda, who are accused of backing the M23 rebels, and the EAC-led Nairobi process, which seeks to diffuse tensions between the various warring parties in the eastern DRC. A glimmer of hope emerged when armed groups agreed to talks, but violence has persisted, fueled by interests in mineral resources and cross-border tensions.
It would be very difficult if there are vested interest among the four member states who are contributing to that summit, to be very honest in terms of providing solution to DRC. Because of that, it becomes like almost impossible to hatch peace in DRC.
Professor Onditi says the persistent violence in the DRC represents a failure of African leadership to address a crisis that undermines the very notion of African unity, independence and self-determination. He says ensuring prosperity, security and peace in Africa appears to be a tall order, with conflicts, violence and wars holding the continent back. Against this backdrop, Onditi argues that there is little the AU can do. Its peacekeeping missions involving African troops have proven to be relatively ineffective. SADC peacekeepers have been deployed in parts of eastern DRC, yet their mandate is limited to protecting civilians, not eradicating armed groups. From a legal perspective, international organizations like the African Union cannot simply bypass the sovereignty of member states in order to intervene or resolve conflicts.
In all the conflict systems that we know on the continent, all the way from Sahel to Great Lake region in the Horn of Africa, across in the Central Africa, we are experiencing the unprecedented levels of conflict. And the challenge is we seem not to be developing mechanisms that would avert those conflicts.
In April 2023, Sudan plunged into a devastating conflict between the Sudanese armed forces and the Rapid Support Forces. Recognizing the urgency, the AU launched diplomatic mediation efforts under the African Union Peace and Security Council. The AU facilitated multiple rounds of negotiations alongside the UN and the AU-affiliated Intergovernmental Authority on Development, or IGAD, a regional bloc of which Sudan is a member. While ceasefires were brokered, none have held. The AU IGAD framework was to convince the two protagonists to come to the negotiation table. That is yet to happen. Why is that? Little will from the warring factions to end the conflict, external influences prolonging the war, but also a general lack of confidence in the parties driving the reconciliation efforts.
The military leaders, they seem not to be having a lot of trust in people who are leading the mediation or the dialogue. And in conflict resolution, the moment parties lose interest, it becomes like, a gone case. It will go into circles, it becomes protracted, and that's where we are in terms of Sudan conflict. But are there windows of opportunities for Sudan to perhaps get a peaceful settlement of their conflict? If you ask me, yes.
Studies show there are armed conflicts in about 20 countries in Africa. Mozambique is another. The northern region of Cabo Delgado has seen a militia insurgency for some years now. Efforts to bring any resolution to the crisis have been limited. In the Sahel, AU peacekeeping missions have struggled against well-armed militia groups. The AU-backed G5 Sahel Force, once a beacon of regional cooperation, has faced severe setbacks from funding shortages to political instability among member states. The military coalition was established by Burkina Faso, Chad, Mali, Mauritania, and Niger to combat terrorism and other security threats in the Sahel region. South Sudan's fragile peace process is one area where the AU has made tangible progress. Through IGAD, warring factions agreed to power sharing, leading to a relative, if uneasy, stability. For Africa, peace remains elusive in many parts of the continent. But the AU says the push to find the right answers will continue. Enoch Sikolia, CGTN.
As earlier mentioned, the 46th ordinary session of the African Union Executive Council got underway on Wednesday, drawing foreign affairs ministers and senior government officials from African Union member states. The Executive Council will be covering vital topics affecting the African continent, such as development, peace and security. CGTN's Nick Mudimba reports.
The opening session, led by AU Chair Moussa Faki, focused on current issues facing the African continent. This year's opening ceremony underscored the pressing issues of rampant conflict that have beleaguered various regions within Africa. It also highlighted the enduring spirit of Pan-Africanism, which looks to unite the continent in a shared vision of peace and prosperity.
Excellency Mr. Chairman.
Our international partnerships are widening, open new horizons. Our international credibility and the visibility in the global arena have set themselves significantly. Detailed reports on all track records will be presented soon. Such achievements should not hide our inadequacies, our shortcomings, our difficulties and challenges, which we continue to face from all sides. Violent conflicts continue to kill in large scale in Africa. Sudan and Eastern DRC are in most respects the most violent tragic theaters. The poor funding of the organization continues to heavily affect the effectiveness of decision-making.
Significant efforts to resolve the continent's peace and security issues took center stage during the session, with delegates and African government officials noting that a lot needs to be done to achieve lasting peace in Africa.
We are focusing on peace and security at this summit, and Sudan and DRC are our main agendas. For us to achieve our targets of 2063, we need to sort out all our troubles and make Africa a better place, free of conflicts.
The call for peace and reconciliation resonated strongly throughout the proceedings, pointing to a collective aspiration for a stable and harmonious Africa. The M23 advance sparked a unified condemnation from a section of foreign ministers.
We are calling for an immediate ceasefire, an immediate pull-out from Goma and from Congo as a whole. This is not something that should be condoned. We are looking for a peaceful resolution, and it's time that Congo is allowed to thrive. Congo DRC is perhaps the richest country in the world. It should be allowed to utilize its resources to develop itself, and of course to have a very strong central government. So this is what we're hoping for and what we're working towards.
Today's session also saw the election of 6 commissioners and other senior officials of the AU organs. The summit is scheduled to conclude on February 16th, culminating in the election of a new AU chairperson. This summit is poised to be a pivotal event for the continent, as it will not only address the long-standing issue of reparations for historical injustices, but also usher in a new chapter in the leadership of the AU Commission under the theme Justice for Africans and People of African Descent through Reparations. The summit provides a unique opportunity for heads of state and government to confront historical wrongs while positioning the AU as a central player in global debates. Nick Mudima, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.